And in other news, the United Kingdom announced Saturday that Britain would temporarily withdraw its ambassadors from Iran following the execution of British-Iranian national Alireza Akbari, who was accused of spying for Britain. British Foreign Minister James Cleverly saying that the UK was considering additional actions against Tehran. And so joining us now to discuss is Dr. Thamar Eilam Gindin, Iran expert from the Esri Center at Haifa University and host of the Enriched Uranium podcast. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So first of all, what can you tell us about this execution? Who was Alireza Akbari?
Alireza Akbari was Deputy Minister of Defense in the Islamic Republic and helper of Ali Shamkhani, who was a representative in the nuclear talks. He was a double national. He had Iranian and British nationality. And like many double nationals, he was arrested for espionage. Now, many Iranian people who oppose the regime are arrested for espionage, and you can never know whether he was really a spy or not, because the accused always say that they didn't spy, and the Islamic Republic always say that they did spy. They don't get a lawyer, they don't get due process, and they're executed more for showing the people that they should be afraid and that they should not take measures against the regime than really for espionage. A few years ago, there was a 16-year-old boy who was accused of espionage, and he said he was spying for Israel for 25 years, and he was convicted. So we can't really tell from the conviction, from the execution, what really happened there.
16 years old, but was spying for 25 years. Now, why did Tehran decide to carry out the execution now? You know, in the midst of the protest, with all the world's eyes on them, does it have anything to do with the UK considering labeling the Iranian Revolutionary Guard as a terrorist group?
I don't think so, because people are executed or sentenced to death for espionage all the time. Now they also sentence people to death because they want to deter the protesters and show them that they they should think twice before doing things against the regime. But every such execution only gives them more motivation to protest, gives the protesters more motivation to overthrow the government. Nothing can really deter them this time.
And I know that you are closely following the situation in the country. You know, what is the current status of the protests, the current atmosphere in the country?
The current atmosphere is it's called a security atmosphere. There are more security forces in the streets. The protests are not as big as they used to be, but they don't go away. Usually there's a wave which is suppressed after a week or two. This time it's not suppressed, but it's they can't keep the same motivation and the same numbers of people on the streets for a long time. So every morning I read where there were protests tonight. In Tehran, for example, they hardly go on the streets, but they shout from the balconies every night. You can see more protests in Zahedan or in Sanandaj and less in the big cities. But every time someone is executed, there are protests in the funeral, there are protests 40 days after, which is a special day in Islam, 40 days after the death, like the 30 days in Judaism. And their graves become a mausoleum. They become like a pilgrimage site with a lot of people there, and also a cause of protest. So these demonstrations, the current protests, cannot be delegitimized, although the government is doing whatever it can to do so. And it seems that nothing really scares the protesters. The reason that the protests are not as strong and not as large as they used to be is more because time passes and they need to keep their motivation high.
All right. Well, I'm sure you will continue to follow the protest, as will we. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
Thank you.